Welcome to meeting number 26 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. The Board of Internal Economy requires that committee adheres to the following health protocols: maintain a physical distance of at least 2 meters from others, wear a non-medical mask unless seated, and preferably wear a mask at all times, including when seated. Maintain proper hand hygiene by using the hand sanitizer provided in the committee room, and regularly wash your hands well with soap. As chair, I will enforce these measures, and I thank you all for your cooperation. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021. I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You may speak in the official language of your choice. At the bottom of your screen, you may choose to hear floor audio or in English or French. With the latest Zoom version, you do not need to select a corresponding language channel before speaking. The raise hand feature is on the main toolbar should you wish to speak. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. When you are not speaking, your microphone should be muted. The committee clerk and I will maintain a speaking list for all members. Today, for the first hour, we will continue our study on labor market impact assessment under the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. The committee is resuming the study of the labor market impact assessment under the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. Today, we will be hearing from witnesses. We have today, as an individual, Faye Arellano, law clerk and community advocate volunteer. We also have Canadian Federation of Agriculture being represented by Scott Ross, Assistant Executive Director, and Chris Van Den Heuvel, Second Vice President. And we will also be hearing from Atlantic Region Association of Immigrant Serving Agencies being represented by Miriam McNee, Executive Director, Craig McKee, Co-Chair, Board of Directors. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all the witnesses. Witnesses will be given 5 minutes for their opening remarks. Before we proceed, I see a hand raised. Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just wonder, before we begin our hearing from our witnesses, at the last committee meeting, I asked about the Hong Kong study and when the draft report would be provided to committee members, to which we were advised that it would be provided, I think, at the end of May 26th.
May 14th.
May 14th. So I'm wondering, is there any possibility if that report could be provided to us by May 7th, or if that deadline was set by the chair, or is it a capacity issue? If it's not a capacity issue, could we receive it by May 7th? Because I see on the calendar, we actually have May 10th and 12th not slotted for witnesses yet. And I wonder if we'd be able to slot the work on the report on May 10th and 12 for the Hong Kong study.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan, for raising that question before we start. But I just wanted to clarify that date was not set by the chair. That was the date which was given based on the input which I was provided by the clerk and the analyst, because they had to compile the report, get the translation done. And that was the earliest I was told that the report can be sent to the members. I can ask the analyst to please clarify on that if there is any possibility of providing it earlier.
Yes, hello. The report is currently with translation. We were told that there were a number of reports in translation, so it's a question more of resources from the Translation Bureau. We can follow up with them and see if we can have a new date, but I cannot promise at this point. We've submitted it. It's been with translation for a while now. We're waiting on them.
Thank you. If we could check, that would be great, because before witnesses are slotted in, I think we have an opportunity. If we can sort of get it by the 7th, then we'll be able to actually go through the materials on the 10th and the 12th. And also, of course, with the Hong Kong study, there is quite an urgent situation. Things are escalating quite a lot in Hong Kong right now. And the sooner we can get this report with our recommendations to the government, I think the better.
I will look up with translation if there's a possibility of changing the date.
Thank you so much.
I will
Thank you,
follow
Madam
up
Chair.
with the clerk and the analyst and see if there is any possibility to get that from the Translation Bureau, and I will accordingly then update the members.
I would really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. And with this, we will now go to our witnesses. Welcome again. So we will start with Ms. Arellano, law clerk and community advocate volunteer, appearing before us as an individual. Welcome, Ms. Arellano. Thanks for appearing before the committee. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. You can please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks for inviting me to participate in this important and timely hearing about study on temporary foreign workers. I am a former lead person of the Ministry of Social Justice and Caregivers Ministry under the Archdiocesan Filipino Catholic Mission in Toronto. And that's where I learned so much about caregivers. And I would like to speak about my observations and recommendations for possible solutions and remedies to shortage of foreign temporary workers, particularly caregivers. It is a fact that Canada has relied on foreign caregivers for vital services to Canadian families with regard to their young children, elderly, and loved ones with disability. By employing caregivers, working families leave for work with peace of mind and confidence that their young children are being taken care of by reliable caregivers in the privacy of their homes. With Canada's aging population, the need for care at home, long-term facilities, and hospitals will only continue to grow. And Canadians with disabilities also benefit from the care and support of a dedicated caregiver. However, the current pandemic has obviously put a strain on the Immigration Department's ability to process applications. Immigration officers who are working remotely simply would not be able to process applications in the usual manner and could not be expected to provide accurate processing times to most applicants. I would like to highlight some of my findings in the course of my research. On the home care provider pilot and support worker pilot, I personally do not know of any successful applicant who has made it to Canada under the current program. I also inquired from lawyers, immigration consultants, social workers, and settlement coordinators about successful applicants, but was told the same thing, that they were also not aware of participants who have been admitted to Canada through those two pilots. And finally, there was a Toronto Star report on April 15, 2021, that said that there were only 5 applications processed under the current programs since its inception in 2019, and one of these 5 was even withdrawn. On the labor market impact assessment, the LMIA, it's still a requirement prior to issuance of work permits to temporary workers under the 2014 changes to the LCP. The LMIA is not only causing delay, but also undue hardships to caregivers applying for extension or renewal of their work permits. The processing fee of $1,000 is exorbitant for employers who are mostly Canadian families wanting to hire caregivers. It takes longer to process, and there is always a risk that caregivers lose status before the process is even completed. On the eligibility criteria, the education requirement proves to be a systemic obstacle to many caregivers. And this is despite the fact that those caregivers have already worked the job that they applied for in the first place. They were functional and successful in what they do in caregiving, and they paid taxes while working. The additional education requirement will likely lead to caregivers working temporarily until such time that he or she is ordered to leave Canada. Many caregivers are failing the language test. One caregiver describes the stressful experience of taking the 4-part test as this: all questions have to be answered under time pressure. At times, my mind just went blank because I was very nervous. She passed the benchmark of level 5 in listening, speaking, and writing. However, she failed the reading part. And this means that she has to retake all 4 parts of the test again and pay the fee of $339 plus taxes. Some caregivers are asking, why can't they just retake one part that they fail instead of redoing the 4 parts again? Now, I have recommendations for caregivers trying to meet requirements for work permits or PR who are already in Canada. The fact that LMIA is no longer a requirement under the current 2 pilots, it will be consistent, it will make more sense in streamlining the process if LMIA is also waived under the 2014 pathway programs. Allow these caregivers cumulative scores for language tests, which will result in higher chances of passing the exams. Combined test scores for many of them may mean more caregivers.
Sorry for interrupting, Mr. Villano. Your time is up. You will get an opportunity to talk further when we go into our round of questioning. So
Sure.
we will now move to our next witness. We will hear from Canadian Federation of Agriculture. Mr. Ross, you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and you can share your time with your colleague if you wish to.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Vanden Heuvel will be speaking on behalf of the CFA today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to speak to you here today. My name is Chris Vanden Heuvel. I'm the second Vice President for the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. We're Canada's largest general farm organization, representing 200,000 Canadian farm families from coast to coast to coast. And I run a mixed dairy and beef operation in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. And as mentioned, I'm also joined by Scott Ross, Assistant Executive Director at CFA. I'd like to start by thanking the committee for inviting farm organizations to speak on the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, and to thank the officials and policymakers who have taken the critical steps to ensure continued access to essential international farm and food workers throughout this COVID-19 pandemic. In 2017, the Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council found 16,500 on-farm vacancies, costing the sector $2.9 billion in lost sales. And these vacancies existed despite 60,000 foreign workers entering Canada. By 2029, they forecast 123,000 more jobs than the domestic labor force is expected to fill. And for an agri-food sector otherwise primed to drive Canada's economic recovery, already providing 12% of Canada's employment and $143 billion in GDP, these labor constraints require a holistic agri-food labor and automation strategy. And while we see some opportunity through immigration pilots and access to permanent residencies, a lack of awareness and issues relating to educational criteria continue to limit access for farm and food workers alike. And at the same time, the pandemic has emphasized the immediate importance of foreign workers to Canadian agriculture, with nearly 2 in 5 agricultural employers experiencing labor shortages at a time where millions of Canadians were displaced from their employment. When it comes to LMIAs, we have seen significant improvements in processing over the past few years, and forums for dialogues between the departments involved in employer associations such as the Service Delivery Working Group, co-chaired by CFA and Service Canada, have been critical in identifying opportunities to reduce administrative burden while enhancing program rigor. However, the efforts of organizations like FARMS, WALI, UPA, and FARMS have also been critical in developing the standards, arranging logistics, and communicating with employers and governments. Throughout COVID-19, the importance of these organizations cannot be overstated. These groups work with thousands of employers to keep them on top of rapidly changing program realities that often differ from region to region. They have taken on immense challenges dealing with constant uncertainty, frustrated employers, and lack of information. I would like to express our gratitude for their ongoing efforts, and we would recommend empowering them as partners through advance notice on program changes and travel restrictions. This would avoid significant confusion, delays, and added cost as employers try to make sense of this ever-evolving program. More generally, I would note that the online LMIA application portal is working well, but needs to ensure that those same organizations can continue to provide producers with support in getting the right documentation and streamlining processing for all involved. At this time, producers find far more delays in work permit approval and renewal processing than the LMIAs themselves, with undue delays also arising where communication is required between government departments. We recommend clear work permit processing service standards and a more robust information sharing between IRCC and Service Canada to avoid costly and undue delays. Similarly, producers are also facing new stress and confusion due to overlapping inspections across multiple orders of government. Integrity audits can halt LMIA processing, which isn't always communicated clearly to employers who at this point were not always clear on who is inspecting them or why. This leaves them in limbo as the production season approaches, and they're waiting on approval of what are truly essential workers. We support a strong inspection regime, but it must be founded on greater coordination and communication between all involved. Under COVID-19, farmers continue to see increased costs for transportation, housing, and PPE, which can be far greater than those without a nearby port of entry. The mandatory isolation support program certainly helps, but as it stands, farmers are bearing significant added costs for their efforts. The Switch Health system for day 10 testing is exacerbating this situation, causing delays that leave workers in mandatory quarantine isolation for extending periods, posing mental health challenges and adding costs. The system appears to be overwhelmed, and urgent reforms are needed to allow farmers to send results to third-party labs. In conclusion, I would draw your attention to...
Sorry for interrupting, Mr. Hewell. Your time is up. You will get an opportunity when we go into round of questioning. We will now hear from Atlantic Region Association of Immigrant Serving Agencies, being represented by Ms. McNee, Executive Director, and Mr. McKee, Co-Chair Board of Directors. So, Ms. McNee, you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and you can share your time with your colleague if you wish to.
Thank you. Craig will start tonight. We will share our time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Craig Mackey, the co-president of ARISA and also executive director of the PEI Association for Newcomers to Canada. The Atlantic Region Association of Immigrant Serving Agencies is an umbrella group for organizations providing immigrant settlement services in New Brunswick, Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, and PEI. ARISA serves as a collective voice and a forum for the 22 member agencies across all 4 provinces who are all committed to the successful settlement and integration of immigrants and refugees in our region. Member organizations have become more effective as a result of ARISA's initiatives to support the sector and as contributions to regional and federal national forums such as this. ARISA members have been involved with and very supportive of the Atlantic Immigration Pilot. The program is very successful. It's employer-driven, and its success can be measured by the fact that it will become a permanent stream in 2022. Temporary foreign workers are an integral and essential part of the economy of Atlantic Canada. The COVID pandemic made this even more obvious when most everything else was shut down last spring and parts of last fall. It was the TFWs who were on the farms, in the fields, at fish plants, driving trucks to deliver food, in long-term care facilities looking after our elders, stocking shelves at the grocery stores, and much more. Without these TFWs risking themselves to do these jobs, we would be in even greater difficulties. Canada needs low-skilled labor. There are not enough Canadians to do the work, and yet we make it difficult and sometimes impossible for employers to get the labor they need to operate their businesses successfully and profitably. A farmer in Eastern PEI brings in dozens of TFWs every summer. He told me point blank he would not be in business without TFWs. My colleague from New Brunswick will take it from here.
Thank you, Craig. I'm Miriam McNee. I'm board member on ARISA and executive director of the Multicultural Association of the Greater Moncton Area, which is also a settlement agency. We want to emphasize the key role settlement agencies play in adapting and developing programs that respond to local labor markets. We innovate with support bridging programs, English in the workplace programs for racially visible immigrant women, and a lot more. We have strong relationships with employers through Atlantic Atlantic Canada. Some of the challenges we see with the LMIA are summarized in 3 points here. One is processing times, which are the longest for lower paid jobs. The processing times are different, except for the lower paid jobs that are needed here. They are the longest, and COVID restrictions have made them even longer. The cost attached to the program, which is $1,000 per employee, is a non-refundable cost, but it's also not an affordable option for small business owners who represent the majority of the employers who choose this stream. The last point is the closed work permit that comes attached to this stream. It's a closed work permit to a single employer, which can be very risky when circumstances change in the workplace, even with the new laws and legislation put in place against employer abuse. We strongly urge this parliamentary committee to examine a recently released report by the Royal Society of Canada titled Supporting Canada's COVID-19 Resilience and Recovery through Robust Immigration Policy and Programs. Some of the recommendations include coordinated FPT planning around levels of temporary foreign workers that respond to current and short-term future labor market needs. As soon as possible, develop more pathways to permanent residency for TFWs, provide targeted settlement funding for supporting TFWs who transition to permanent residence, because currently IRCC only funds settlement agencies to support permanent residents. Issue a sector-specific rather than employer-specific work permit that allows temporary foreign workers to work for any employer within the sector. Incorporate adherence to national standards of safe conditions and fair compensation into the labor market impact assessment. And finally, pilot an expansion of universal healthcare coverage to include temporary foreign workers. The report to which we are referring was released last month and contains excellent research and a number of high-quality recommendations. In summary, not only will greater support for temporary foreign workers help the Canadian economy, but given these hardworking individuals, a pathway to permanent residency will enhance our diversity and make us culturally richer. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We will now proceed to our round of questioning, and we will start our 6-minute round of questioning with Mr. Seebeck. Mr. Seebeck, you can please proceed. Floor is yours, and you will have 6 minutes for your round of questioning.
Great, thanks very much. I want to pick up quickly where, Chris, you were talking about agriculture, and I have a large agricultural community in my riding. It's actually the #1 employer, and it is the #1 contributor to economic growth. I've heard from farmers in my riding many times about how difficult the process is, some of the things that you've outlined, the challenges with deadlines, and I guess what I want to talk about is we've talked a little bit about a trusted employer. I'd like to know what your thoughts would be on that, whether you think that would make a lot of sense in the farming sector. And number 2, how do you develop a system to deal with the bad apples, to use an agricultural term, because we do have some of those who are bringing in temporary foreign workers?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the question. And so 2 things. Yeah, I think the notion of a trusted farmer would go a long way to helping alleviate some of the issues that we've seen in processing delays. If some of these farms have been bringing workers in, and oftentimes the same workers for years, if not decades, so streamlining that process and not requiring them to bring renew the application every year over year, and go through the same delays. And especially as we've seen during these pandemic times, program changes on the fly. Oftentimes, we understand the reasoning for it. We certainly respect and know that we've got to keep Canada healthy and safe, but at the same time, we have to keep them fed as well. So I think that would go a long way. As far as the comment on the bad apples, unfortunately, you're correct. There's no doubt, no matter what industry or sector you're in, there's going to be some of those that try and undermine the process and whatnot. We do support fully the an audit system. We would just like more we have multiple levels of government that come in, whether they're federal, provincial, local, municipal, public or public health authorities, and oftentimes farmers don't understand who's coming in and why. So we need more clarity on that, and we need to understand. I think from a holistic approach, and that was why our comment on national labor strategy is going to be so important, so that we understand the full ramifications of what's going to be expected from us as an industry in the years and decades ahead.
And then, okay, so I'm going to follow up. So sorry to put you on the spot with that, but what would you look at as sort of, what would the metrics be, or how would you design the actual trusted employer with respect to farming? What would you want to see in place? Have you turned your mind to that as an organization, i.e., if that's kind of my question. I want to figure out how we can design these things that are actually going to work and that the government will accept.
Yeah, I think consulting, first off, like you're doing with the industry, is certainly a first step. And I'll defer to Scott Ross, our Assistant Executive Director, who might have some more knowledge on any details that have been intimated already.
Yeah, I think on the notion of a trusted employer model, we've seen the program evolve over the last few years, and with that, our understanding of what that model might look like has sort of changed. We've seen LMIA processing for agricultural employers, for example, speed up a fair bit and is working quite well. Where we do see, I think, a need for some more focus, as Chris said, is on, in some areas, there are just chronic labor shortages with the same employers year after year. So finding ways to streamline that labor market assessment, make it a little tighter, so that component of the LMIA process is a little smoother. And then when it comes to the inspection regime, I think what we would like to see is more of a risk-based lens applied more generally, is, focus resources where they're most needed. When you see a long history of compliance, multiple overlapping inspections across orders of government, coordinate those so you're not having as many sort of disparate engagements that are putting a lot of burden on the employer, while targeting your own limited resources where they're best served on those that might not have that same line of sight all the time. So those are a couple of what we see as really critical elements of that trusted employer model.
Great. And I'm going to ask you, if you have some, think about later, have some submissions you'd like to make to the committee on that, please send that in, because when we do write our report, I'd love to have some very specific recommendations. I want to just turn back to the actual application process. We're talking about how can we simplify the process. It's one of the top 3 complaints that I hear from farmers who are busy. It's a challenging environment for them, and they find the whole process very complicated. And sometimes, they're at their wits' end trying to figure out exactly what the government wants in these applications. Do you have an idea of how we should simplify these applications so they're a little more user-friendly for the average farmer?
Scott, do you want to take that?
Sure. Yep, I can speak to that as well. I mean, one of the things I would say is when we hear concerns coming from farmers about the application process, one of the realities is they can't just always discern what's the LMIA process and what's the work permit process. There's not a lot of transparency necessarily there, and understanding of what is holding up the process. Increasingly, as we've seen some really significant improvements on the processing side of LMIAs, it's now the work permit side of the equation that is slowing things down. Everything from access to documentation from international consulates to issues where an administrative change that's quite minor in scope has to go through a number of intermediaries to be communicated between 2 government departments. And so it's not any one specific issue.
Sorry for interrupting, Mr. Ross. Time is up. We will now proceed to Ms. Dillon. Ms. Dillon, you will have 6 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today. I'm going to start with Mrs. Arellano. My first question, it's regarding the mentioning of abusive and exploitive employers. We've heard much testimony about that, and people have experienced that. What do you think about the introduction by our government of an occupation-specific work permit for caregivers rather than having them tied down to one employer so they can escape these abusive and exploitive conditions of work sometimes? What is your opinion of our government implementing this plan? Thank you.
Oh, actually, in the current 2 pilots, that's actually one of those best features that they like, that it's now an occupation is specific rather than employer specific. And that allows caregivers to move from one employer to another easier. And the fact that the new 2 pilot projects do not require LMIA anymore, it's easier for them to escape abusive situation. And that is really a good thing.
Thank you. And Mrs. Arellano, earlier this year, Minister Mendicino announced a plan to overcome the pandemic-related roadblocks that have interfered with processing applications from caregivers and their families by announcing a plan for 2021, which includes finalizing a permanent resident applications for up to 6,000 caregivers who have completed their in-Canada work experience and their immediate families by December 31st, 2021, making at least 1,500 first-stage decisions on applications for the home childcare provider and home support worker pilots by June 30th, 2021, increasing the digitization of caregiver applications, and ensuring applicants receive acknowledgement of receipt letters by May 31st, 2021. Can you please tell the committee if you feel these initiatives will have a positive impact on the backlog for processing of caregiver applications? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that announcement recently by the immigration minister was a welcome news to 6,000 caregivers who are actually waiting for determination of their application. And the fact that their families are also included in that determination is really a welcome news to those caregivers. The only thing that I would like to point out at this point is that we're also aware that there are caregivers who have already lost their status because of the long wait in LMIA, or some of them due to no fault of their own, they lost their status and the ability to work with legal contracts or work permits. We are actually concerned about those types of caregivers because those are the ones who are in need of advocacy, and they need help in terms of bringing them into the light so that there won't be as much precarious situations for them in terms of vulnerability, abuse, and exploitation. These undocumented caregivers, we would like to actually recognize the work that they've done in the past prior to having lost their status, and therefore by doing that, providing them an amnesty program in which we could bring them back on track to working legally again is, I think, a step in the right direction as well. Especially in this pandemic time, we hear of people needing essential workers or caregivers right this minute, but because of the backlog or even the bottleneck in the applications outside Canada. Remember, as I said earlier, we haven't really heard about those applications under the 2 new programs having admitted to Canada. Therefore, there really is a dire need of these caregivers to be on hand and working when they are needed. And I thought that these caregivers who have lost their status would mean a solution to that kind of problem that we're facing now in addressing the shortage of these foreign caregivers. Maybe this committee would like to reconsider providing a program of amnesty for these non-status caregivers who might be a big help in providing, or continuing to grow the economy in Canada, because that would mean working families can leave for work without having to think about people looking after their children, or people with disability, or their seniors who are at home. And therefore, there's so much that Canada can actually benefit from having these caregivers who have lost their status, and yet they're still here, but they need another chance to get back on track. And I think I would put it before the committee to please reconsider that and just take a look at that project. There was
Sorry
one
for
project like
interrupting,
that.
Ms. Arellano. Your time is up. We will now proceed to our next member. Madame Normanton, you will have 6 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. I will begin I'm going to ask a question of Mr. Van den Heuvel and Mr. Ross. You talk about the problems with Switchell and also the problems with the temporary foreign workers problem in the agricultural sector. $1,500 wasn't perhaps as sufficient as it was last year because now the quarantine periods are much longer this year. Do you think the amount should be increased this year, and if so, why?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we definitely think that the amount should be increased. As you've mentioned, the time frames for quarantine period have often increased, and with some of the delays that you've mentioned with Switch Health and some of the other processing delays, a lot of firm workers are being held in quarantine for even much longer than they're required, and those firm worker costs are being borne by the farmers themselves. And if you only have one or two workers or half a dozen workers, that's bad enough. But some of our farms are bringing in hundreds and hundreds of employees, and it adds up very, very quickly and has a significant financial impact. So, Scott, I don't know if you have anything further to add. Or
I would just also add transportation logistics under COVID-19 in particular have been a real challenge. Charter flight costs, where particularly where a number of workers aren't able to board the flight due to pre-departure testing, can see the cost of individual tickets double, triple, and this is all borne by the employer without any available support. And similarly, if you are quite a distance from an approved port of entry, the cost to get your workers to your operation is also done through private means and can be quite expensive. So we've seen a continued rise in incremental costs throughout the pandemic and have not seen that sort of reflected in the mandatory isolation support program.
Merci beaucoup pour votre réponse très élaborée.
Thank you very much for your complete answer. You also talked about the problem about a lack of information when there are changes made to different programs. Do you have any ideas or suggestions to make for the government of 1,500 employers? They have should it be 3,000 per year instead of 1,500? Should there be a dedicated phone line for groups like yours in the future? What ideas do you have?
Yeah.
Sure. Yes. Yeah, I can speak to that. One of the challenges under COVID-19 has been that region to region, there's quite a bit of variability in the cost. And so it's not a simple answer to put a dollar figure on what the increase should be. Ultimately, we are aware of some employers paying up to $3,000 per worker in incremental costs on top of the normal sort of costs associated with the program. And these are vital, essential workers in our food system and play a fundamental role in Canadian food security. So ultimately, we would like the flexibility of that program to significantly increase, and if not in that program, some additional funding programs made available to target the specific issues that continue to evolve throughout the pandemic, because it really isn't a one-size-fits-all issue.
Merci beaucoup. Parlant de la flexibilité des programmes, justement.
Speaking about flexibility of programs, what do you think about the idea that in addition to having trusted employers, there should be longer periods of time, given that there are the same temporary foreign workers that come back year after year after year? Maybe they should have a 3-year visa, for example, to be able to work in Canada. Would that be a good idea?
I can say it's not something we've discussed directly in terms of the length of time, what would be appropriate, but we do recognize that for those employers that are bringing the same workers back year after year for upwards of decades at a time, that there is significant administrative burden associated with that process that in many respects could be avoided through some amendments and flexibilities there. So it's certainly an issue that we're sensitive to and an area we would welcome discussion on.
Parfait. Et au niveau des permis, souvent les permis présentement sont des permis.
Though these are closed permits at the present time. They can only work for one employer. Wouldn't it be a good idea to have more flexibility in terms of permits so workers could share, so employers rather could share the workers, and it would be good for the employees as well?
On that front, we do see the seasonal ag worker program has a transfer mechanism that has incorporated quite a bit of flexibility that allows for workers to more easily move between different farm operations. And more than anything, in Quebec, for example, they tend to use the agricultural stream that does not have that same mechanism in place. And we would welcome that flexibility and introduction of more flexibility and ability to have a structured transfer between employers to assist with that very issue.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Je pense qu'il me reste 15 secondes. J'aurai pas le temps de poser une question qu'elle soit très...
I only have 15 seconds left, so I'll give it back to you. I can't have that question in the translation.
Thank you, Ms. Normandin. Bells have started ringing for a vote. So these are 30 minutes bell. Do I have the unanimous consent of the committee to proceed until like 4:30?
Yes.
Okay, so we will continue that. Thank you. We will now proceed to Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan, you will have 6 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses. My first question goes to Ms. Arellano. As we're talking about the caregiver situation, the government's announcement it basically shortchanges, frankly, the number of caregivers that could receive PR into Canada by over 10,000 if you account for the numbers based on 2019 and the lost numbers between then and now. As a result of COVID. So given that this is the case, we know that the numbers are going to be oversubscribed in what the government has announced with the 6,000 spots. What do you think the government should do to address this situation?
Well, obviously, there needs to be a higher number for the government to process and complete the applications of those caregivers on queue. And by that would mean they need more people or more staff to actually attend to those. And I cannot speak for that, but as far as we are concerned, it's only by expediting applications that are already there and are needing determination. That's the only way we can actually bring in more of these caregivers to have permanent status and also for whatever it is that's keeping the government or the IRCC to have the applicants under the new programs to actually get into Canada. I understand that there is the restraint because of the COVID, but it seems that the only way we can actually get more of those people in the backlog is really to hire more staff for the IRCC to actually, do the determination.
Thank you. Well, one of the calls from the caregivers and from migrant workers, actually, broadly speaking, is that they're calling for landed status on arrival. And so that is to say that they will actually get permanent resident status when they arrive. Is that something that you would support?
Actually, if you would look at the new 2 pilots, it's more or less a conditional PR for the participants. And all they have to do is to do the 2-year requirement. And because the assessment happens before they come in. And I thought that was one of those recommendations in the past that was already met by the 2 new programs, the 2 new pilots. However, because of the COVID, nothing really has come out of it.
Yeah, part of the problem too related to that is that, as you indicated yourself, that the program is so onerous that people cannot meet the requirements. And so the language requirements, the educational requirements actually blocks them. And so aside from COVID, there's a real question in terms of the structure of the program that prevents people. And so, so that is a critical issue that I would think that the government needs to address as well. On the language testing, it's just heartbreaking. There's so many caregivers who are here who cannot pass the language tests, and some of them will lose their status as a result of that, having worked the years and waited this long and would never be able to reunite with their loved ones and bring their loved ones here to Canada. Aside from the idea of allowing for caregivers to take tests separately, given that they are already meeting the language requirements with their employer, should the government even have the language test at all? Should they not actually get rid of it altogether?
I fully agree with you. And I think it's one of those things that caregivers are clamoring for, that the government should consider eliminating the education and the language requirements, because those are the things that are huge stumbling blocks for them, because their care work is actually by itself successful because they're able to render the work itself, except that the language and the education would trip them not to have permanent residence.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Ms. Makni. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Just want to ask the question about TFWs generally and on the issue around status, giving them status and recognition. I wonder if you can comment on that.
Well, I think before we get to the permanent residency pathways, I think step one would be to find them eligible for settlement services, to have enough support to know what pathway would be adequate for them in order to start their PR process, their permanent residency. Right now, as settlement agencies, our funding doesn't allow for any help to provide to the temporary foreign workers. So they're not allowed to go to language classes, receive orientations, get employment counseling and all of that. So I think that's step number one. And if they manage to get those services, we would be the first people to guide them to what pathway they should go through, even though we don't do consultancy and fill out paperwork.
The government made the announcement for TFWs, and actually they do not include anybody without status. So you have to have status. So that means the people who are here, who are contributing and supporting us during this pandemic period, would not be eligible to access permanent resident status streams. Do you think the government should change that?
I believe so. If we we realize that our economy needs more participation from immigrants to help fill out the gaps in the labor market, and whether low or high paid jobs. And we
Sorry for interrupting, Ms. Makni. Time is up for Ms. Kwan. Okay. We will now proceed to our second round of questioning, and Mr. Helen, you will have 4 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses. Ms. Arellano, well, in your opening statement, you had some recommendations, but you were cut short on time. Do you want to take up to give us some of the recommendations you wanted to give?
Oh, thank you very much. For sure, yes. And one of the other recommendations that I have written down is I would like to call on the IRCC to remove the caregiver program under its current economic immigration programs, because the federal caregiver program has been around for the last 3 decades. The LCP, which ran from 1992 to 2014, was an important source for those families needing caregivers. The program may be flawed, but it gave more caregivers a chance to become permanent residents. However, in 2014, participants lost their automatic path to permanence, and caregivers who, despite having toiled for many years in Canadian households, are refused PR. I also recommend the removal of the language and educational requirements, which did not exist prior to 2014 changes that prevent these caregivers from obtaining PR. And finally, I really would like to push for that amnesty program for caregivers who have lost their status, because I have listed in my material a few of the reasons why they lost their status, and usually it's beyond their control. There were even those caregivers who lost their status because their employers did not pay their taxes, or their employers did not get their LMIA on time, and therefore they were found to be violating the IRPA. And there's other reasons that they lost their status, and they're usually beyond their control. And for us to actually give them
sorry for
justice.
interrupting, Ms. Arellano. I think there is some interpretation issue. I'll stop the clock. Mr. Clerk, you texted me that there is no interpretation. Can you please look into it?
I'm looking into it now. Madam Chair, I understand that we had an issue with audio quality. To our witness, Ms. Arellano, if I could trouble you to just perhaps bring your microphone just a little bit closer to your upper lip and continue speaking. Thank you.
Can you please say a few words, Ms. Arellano?
Is it better now? Can you hear me properly now, or better?
Can you say two, three sentences, please?
Okay. With regard to my recommendation, I would like to continue with it, but I think I'm having technical problem with my microphone.
Mr. Clerk, is it good now?
Yes.
Okay, you can please proceed. I will start the clock.
Okay, as I was saying, I respectfully request that the committee support and that Minister Mendocino implement an amnesty program to regularize out-of-status caregivers. These potential workers are already here. Bringing them into the light and regularizing their contributions, be it in terms of taxes, filling the shortages in essential workers, or as caregivers needed in homes, could only mean benefits for Canada to continue to grow its economy post-pandemic. The caregiver amnesty program may be patented after the temporary. Yes?
Sorry.
Madam Chair, there is a problem with interpretation.
Mr. Clerk, please look into it. Ms. Arellano, can you please move the mic a little up, like between your nose and the lips? And can you say a few words now?
Okay. So the caregiver amnesty program that I was talking about, I would ask that it be patterned after the temporary policy used in 2020 for the out-of-status construction workers. Can you hear me better?
No interpretation.
Madam Chair, it doesn't look like the mic is connected to the computer. I feel like the sound is coming out of the camera.
We confirm that her headset is connected.
Okay, so it's good. How about now? Can you still not hear me properly?
Can you say two sentences, please?
Okay. The minimum requirements and qualifications may mean more caregivers will have a second chance to work legally and have a shot at PR in Canada. So is that better?
No, I see Ms. Normandy nodding her head. No.
Is it the interpretation or?
I'm advised that it's an issue of audio quality. I don't have further details at this time, I'm afraid.
Madame la Présidente, on a eu rapidement.
Madam Chair, there was some interpretation for Ms. Arellano, but we got her last sentence.
Say another two sentences, Ms. Arellano. Again, we will try if there is.
Okay. The minimum requirements and qualifications may mean more caregivers will have a second chance to work legally and have a shot at PR in Canada.
No.
Still no? Problem with the mic? Is it only Miss Christine Normandy, or how is everybody?
No, there is no interpretation. No,
no interpretation.
No interpretation. I think they cannot get this your audio.
Anyway, I have hard copies of my notes. If Miss Christine Normandy would like a copy of my notes, I would certainly send it to you as soon as we're done. How
yeah, Ms.
Like
Arellano, you can please, if you don't mind, if you can send that to the clerk of the committee, and then we will circulate it to all the members.
Definitely, I will do that.
Yeah. Mr. Clerk, can you look into it, or we can proceed, or no?
I don't have further information at this time. I understand that there's an audio quality issue with Ms. Arellano's audio. I don't have more detailed information at this time. I'm conferring with our IT and interpretation staff, and I can provide you more information when I have it. That's all the information I have at the time.
We are left with few minutes. Mr. Allen, would you like to ask, you have your rest of your time with other witness?
Yeah, sure. And maybe so if Ms.
You have 1 minute and 15 seconds.
Ms. Arellano, maybe you can also submit. I was going to ask you about what you think about the processing time of 12 months, because it seems like it's a little long for especially people with disabilities living in the house. So if you could please submit that as well. I'll move on to the CFA, and anyone can answer this. We're talking about the issues about testing and how it's affected employers and how much it costs, especially when the testing centers or the where they fly in from is kind of far away. What are some of your suggestions on, from beginning to end, how do we change this process? How do we make it more streamlined?
Can take a start, Chris, if you'd like. When it comes to the testing regime under Switch Health in particular, one of the issues we've seen is that often results are either being lost in courier or translation to the end laboratory. And as a result, there's a number of workers left in quarantine because simply they don't have the results of their day 10 test. So one of the options we've proposed is more leveraging of other private sector health practitioners and third-party laboratories that are out there, because there's a sense generally that the system is just overwhelmed at the moment. So trying to take advantage of other resources that exist and leveraging those to make sure that we don't see that happen.
Sorry for interrupting, Mr. Ross. Time is up for Mr. Hallen. We will now proceed to Mr. Reagan. Mr. Reagan, you will have 4 minutes for your round of questioning, and then we will end this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to start with the Federation of Agriculture, and perhaps Mr. Vanden Heuvel. How difficult is it in farming generally to get and keep qualified workers? Also, we've heard from you today about the challenge of organizing charter flights during the pandemic. How has the pandemic impacted the level of reliance that agriculture has on temporary foreign workers? And will your labor needs change in some way, do you think, when the pandemic ends?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. There's no doubt that this industry is one that's very, very difficult. A lot of hard, backbreaking labor, but it's not what we consider low-skilled labor. That's one clarification that that we would like to put forth. That these workers that are coming in are often very, very highly skilled, and they're extremely good at what they do, and it makes it very difficult to backfill these positions with Canadians who are often a couple of generations removed from their farms, and so we there's no doubt that we do rely on these workers coming in. As far as labor changing, perhaps after the pandemic, I think the issue is only going to become worse. Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council has pointed out in their studies that the labor shortfall is projected to double in the next 10 years' time. So so I think that we're going to be inundated with requests for positions, and by not being able to fulfill those is only going to put us in a worse situation. So I think I answered your question,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah. What is your view on this question of concern about open work permits and so forth? What's your view of open work permits? And also, have you had any experience with the vulnerable workers pilot program that I think Mr. Ross might have mentioned? Not sure.
Yeah, I'll let Scott address that. Sure. Yeah.
I'm not sure what you're speaking to on the last initiative. I know with the Migrant Workers Support Network is centralized out of British Columbia. I know some of our members have been involved in that, but I can't speak to that necessarily myself. When it comes to the issue of open work permits, the concerns our members have very much is the time and energy and resources it takes to bring a worker into Canada, and the extensive sort of relationship and investment that exists there, and predictability of labor being a big question. I don't think there's outright opposition to the notion of occupational work permits, but there would have to be some sort of systems in place to ensure that farmers who are facing a harvest are not suddenly without critical labor at that time, seeing food go to waste and lost opportunities there. I think when you look at the time it takes to turn around an application, which is in the months, 4 to 6 months at minimum, it's just not realistic for farmers to be able to find another worker. And the pandemic has really highlighted that even when Canadians are significantly displaced from their other employment, we did not see a drive of a lot of Canadian workers coming to farming. And so the solution likely in many respects still resides internationally. And we just need to have means of ensuring predictability and availability of labor at critical harvest windows and seeding, for example.
Mr. Mackey and Ms. Mechny, or either one of you, do you have a view on how to deal with this issue?
Craig, I'll let you take that.
Thanks, Miriam. Yeah, I would echo what Mr. Ross just said. I think that there's a consistency across a lot of sectors that's the approach to take. So rather than taking in more time, I'll echo that.
Sorry for interrupting, Mr. Regan. Your time is up, and we are now left about 8 minutes left to go and vote. So this panel comes to an end. I want to take this opportunity to thank all our witnesses for appearing before the committee and providing important input as we continue this study. If for lack of time, you were not able to bring some of the recommendations or things, you can always submit a written, you can always send a written submission to the clerk of the committee, and that information will be circulated to the members, and we will take into consideration as we go through this study. So thank you once again, and for all the members, we will log in immediately after the vote and have our second hour considering the draft report. Please log into the in-camera meeting logins immediately after the vote. So thank you once again, and see you in a few minutes.
you.